Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by eBodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. Straight into it. First of all, folks, welcome to another episode of The Real Deal Show, where I, Jay Reale, get in depth with the personalities, the figures, the infamous and the famous of bodyboarding. And today I have someone on with me who you may or may not know. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us your name.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ryder Jalbert.
Awesome.
From Maui, Hawaii, born and raised.
Wow.
And I love boogie boarding. Been
And
boogie
how
boarding
old-
as long as I can remember.
How old are you, Ryder?
21 years old.
Okay, so you're a youngster, at least in my world. You're a youngster. And so Ryder, for those of you that don't know, as he said, born and raised in Maui. If you have ever seen him on Instagram or followed his Instagram, he has a penchant for the gnarly, heavy, and dangerous type of surf. And of course, living in a place like he does in Maui, there are some gnarly, dangerous, and heavy waves at certain spots over there, some of which he may reveal and some of which he may not reveal. But we will get into that first because I mention it. Ryder, what's your Instagram?
My Instagram is Ryder the Epic. That's RYDER, the Epic.
Okay, perfect. So guys, check that out. And I have my phone here. I'm looking down at it because I was on his Instagram. I actually have it on the screen. So I don't use Zoom that much. And because we had to have you call me, I'm not able to share that screen of his Instagram, but trust me, what he just said, check it out. You'll see some stuff. You came on my radar. I guess you sort of came across my Instagram, I don't know, maybe a couple years ago, and my daughter met you actually randomly. So how did that happen? Tell me about that. Do you remember?
Yeah, so she was kind of mutuals with a few of my friends. And I stumbled upon your podcast and I was like, sick, this man, he's talking about boogie boarding. He's meeting with people from all over the world and they're discussing their love for the sport and where it can go. And I was like, I became a fan instantly. And then one day, Sage posted a picture and you were in it. And I was like, wait a second. I made the connection, Sage Reale and Jay Reale, and I was like, holy cow. I'm friends with like one of my biggest, I guess, stars in the world of boogie boarding. And so it was just really, really cool to make that connection and finally make this happen.
So my daughter, she lives on Oahu, and so you must have been over there for some reason. Why were you over on Oahu?
Yeah, so I go to school at UH Manoa.
Yep.
I'm going to be heading into my junior year. And yeah, that's the reason why I'm here.
And are you studying something to do with oceanography, meteorology? Are you in that field? I think I saw that.
Yeah, I originally was. I entered in freshman year with pursuing a degree in atmospheric science.
Yep.
That ended up changing because I realized how much I hate physics, and I had to go pretty high up for physics.
Right.
And so now I'm currently pursuing a BA in mathematics.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is quite a switch. And with a view to do what with that degree? Do you have any idea what you'd want to do?
That's a fantastic question. Not really. I came to college and so far over my past few years, the only subject I've weirdly enough enjoyed has been math.
Wow.
And to be honest, I despised it all throughout high school. And then freshman year, I had a really, really good math teacher in college, and it just kind of completely changed my perspective on it. And it's just numbers that interest me since.
I love it, man. That's cool how you can grow into math. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah. So let's get into your sort of origin story. You said born and raised on Maui. You're 21 years old. So where on Maui did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in Wailuku Hospital. Spent the first 3 years of my life in Haiku, and then I moved to Paia. And there I kind of, we live pretty close to the ocean. And so I started getting in the water at a pretty young age. I never really I got into surfing for a bit when I was younger, but I was always kind of drawn more into boogie boarding. Maybe it was because of like
Yeah.
the locations I hung out at and the breaks, they were just more boogie boardable. Um, but I kind of always for a while, the longest time, it was kind of just like a hobby, just something for fun. Um, and then it actually wasn't until COVID happened that I really developed a love and passion for the sport. Um, while it was kind of ravaging everywhere else in the world, Maui kind of was like one of the best places for a 17-year-old kid. I mean, you had no tourists on the island. The waves were firing that entire summer. And so pretty much every single day I'd drive down to the South Shore and go boogie boarding. And from there I started to charge bigger waves. And I was like, I'm really starting to dig this. This is developing into something new.
Well, of course, there's been a long line of really top level bodyboarders from Maui, going all the way back. We got, some OGs like Jimmy Hutaff and, you know, Chad Militante. I don't even know if you know these guys. They're kind of
I
guys
know
from the
Chad.
90s.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, Jimmy owns Foam Company. And, you have guys like Jacob Romero, and there's so many others that rip. Do you know all these guys? Is it a really tight bodyboarding community there on Maui?
Yeah, I know Jimmy. I been in the line with Jacob a few times. Just always in awe watching watching him rip. It's always a treat to see him. But I mean that's part of the reason why I love the boogie boarding community so much. Is it's a pretty I would consider it a more niche sport. But and because of that, I feel like the community is a lot more tightly woven together, and you really start to know each other and just see people in the lineup, and just you kind of just it's really easy to make friends and become a part of it.
Yeah, when I started bodyboarding, it was like that. If you just saw another bodyboarder, it didn't matter where you went. Everybody, it was sort of a camaraderie because we were the minority, the vast minority, because there were so many surfers. And back in those days, in my early days, there was a lot of animosity towards bodyboarders, because we were new and threatening their lineup, their hierarchy, if you will. But yeah, it sounds like Maui still has a little bit of that going. And so you said you had, you were going to places that were sort of more optimal for bodyboarding. Was there a regular spot that you hit up most of the time on Maui
Yeah,
that
so
you can name without getting in trouble?
yeah. Um, Paia Bay. Paia Bay was a great one. I mean, it's still just hot spot for so many Groms today and up and coming bodyboarders. But there's this place right next to it called PYCC, which is the Paia Youth and Cultural Center. It's kind of like the equivalent of the Boys and Girls Club. Um,
Yeah.
and so my mom pretty much, she would drop me off when I was younger, and she could go have a few hours of peace and bliss, and then I would just go and run around there and hop in the water, and that was one of my main spots growing up.
Now, were you ever into competition? Did you do any contests over there or anywhere else?
Yeah, I did a bit competing when I was younger, around 9, 10, around those ages. But I was always kind of a taller kid. And so it was really, I found it hard for me to kind of maneuver doing those aerial moves that you see a lot of kids doing nowadays.
Yeah.
Arses, backflips, just whatever crazy combos they're doing nowadays. And that's kind of the biggest way you score points. And so I kind of fell out of that competing crowd, and got more into I guess, just trying to find the biggest wave I could and just trying to charge that.
Yeah. So I mean, where was your first memory of riding waves that really scared you? Like how old were you? Where was it? Waves
Um,
that you were like, I could potentially die out here.
yeah, yeah. I would say I was 17. It was at Ho'okipa, which is this break on the North Shore. It's much more of a surfing location. However, I was just starting to kind of expand my interests and dip my feet in kind of just the more bigger waves at the time. And I remember one day paddling out into the lineup one morning. It was probably just like 5, 6 wine, but at that time, it's just that was pretty big for me. And I just remember saying to one of the uncles out there, just like, these are some of the biggest waves I've ever been in. Like, this is insane.
I
And he just
don't
started
want to
laughing.
die.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna die. Yeah. And that's kind of just like that thrill is really what started to drive me. And I was just like, if I push myself here, what else am I capable of pushing myself towards?
Yeah. So obviously Ho'okipa isn't that far from, the well-known Peahi, also known as Jaws. Did you ever kind of think someday I want to ride that place? I want to go there.
Yeah. So I was, Piahi is just a spectacle within itself, and just watching the waves there, I'd gone a few times as a kid. I never really had my eyes on that until COVID happened, and I just fell more in love with boogie boarding. And I just started catching bigger waves, and then I saw, you've probably heard of him, Andrew Carr.
Yes.
I saw a clip of him out there, and I was like, holy crap, this man is doing something that, like, was once thought impossible, and he's making it possible. And I remember seeing a clip of him getting barreled out there, and I was just in complete awe.
Yep.
And after that, I was just like, okay, maybe this is something I can really work towards.
Yep.
And so I started, that's just, I told my parents, I was like, you know what, this is something that I want to do. And so I decided not to go to college that year, and I ended up taking a gap year, and I spent that year training for Jaws, and I eventually got out there.
This is, by the way,
Yeah.
I believe that's a Jaws, right?
That's actually at this other outer reef spot called Pier One. That was kind of
Oh.
my first experience with big waves. Yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing, like paddling out for. I didn't really know what to expect. I DM'd Andrew Carr on Instagram, and he was like, "Yeah, we're going up to Pier One tomorrow. It's like should be a good day for you to kind of get into bigger waves." And I was just like, "Heck yeah, let's do it."
So you paddle out with him.
Yeah, paddle that with him.
He's kind
Yeah,
of showing you the ropes out there. And eventually you did take it to Jaws. This is a shot of you dropping in on Tyler
yeah,
Laurent, who
yeah,
who I know because he was our boatman in Tavarua one year. A
yeah.
great legendary guy. And you actually did, mention in your post that you were so sorry and you feel like you
God.
cooked out in was that your first ever
So
wave you caught at Jaws?
that was my first ever wave at Jaws. And that image, you didn't really show it, but I probably ended up getting within 2 feet of him when I
So
just came barreling down the face.
yeah, you
And
can't. That's
yeah,
it's a still image, but you can see they're on a collision course right there.
yeah, no, there is so much adrenaline running through me, and I thought I heard someone yell "go." In reality, they probably were yelling "no."
No,
No, no,
bro.
don't go.
Oh,
And I just stared down the face of the wave. I didn't even see him, and
yeah.
I kind of just like, I guess, blacked out for a second, and then before I knew it, I was at the very bottom, and I was just like, holy crap. And then he just comes riding behind me, and he's just like, dude, what the heck? And it was probably the most embarrassing moment of my life, because I had spent months and months training for this. I had this image in my head of what the wave was going to look like and how it was going to go. And then I just cooped out so hard. And I mean, didn't even help that I was on a boogie board as well. Cause I mean, there's that
The
animosity you spoke
stigma,
of, the
sure.
stigma, yes. And I immediately apologized. It's like, hey, dude, I cooped out really hard. I'm never going to make that mistake again. And I shook his hands, and, luckily I dropped in on a nice dude, and he was able to realize I was still a youngin' and made a mistake.
Yeah, so I can totally understand. I've never ridden waves that big, but I do understand your mentality. You're super hyped up, focused, full of adrenaline, and it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that place, Jaws, or any big wave spot like that, once you see a wave and you decide I'm going to paddle as hard as I can to catch this, you're kind of committed at that point. And of course, you would look and make sure no one's behind you, but in the heat of battle at that point, your first wave ever, you were just completely focused on, getting into the wave and not getting pitched with the lip and making it to the shoulder. So I think it can be excused. And the fact that you didn't actually take him out at the bottom of the
Yeah.
wave and you
Thankfully,
guys,
he's a good
both
surfer.
ate it. Yeah, that was probably a good thing in that respect. So yeah, I mean, hats off to you, man, for charging, all these big waves that you ride. I want to ask you. We just touched briefly there on the stigma thing. I know when Mike Stewart rode Jaws in the mid '90s, I believe he was the first bodyboarder to ride that spot, and it was documented. But he mentioned that he had a really hard time out there because there was only a few guys driving skis back in those days. I think he had like Dave Kalama and maybe Laird, and nobody wanted to tow him into a wave because he was unproven out there and he's on a bodyboard. So he came up against a bit of a wall, and finally he convinced somebody to kind of like tow him into a wave. And so there was that sort of standoffishness. Is it still like that out in a place like Jaws where it's so surfer dominated? There's always been a few bodyboarders that have taken a stab at it, but is there some attitude that you feel when you're out there?
You know what? No. I think that the community has changed a lot since that era, since kind of just like the proving ground days of just where it's very, very new sport. But it's kind of when you're out at a big wave spot like that, you realize that hopefully everybody knows what they're doing out there. And since you kind of make that assumption, therefore you kind of have to attach a certain level of respect as well.
Right.
And I was a bit worried about that when I first started paddling out into big waves. But when you get to that level of charging, it's kind of just you respect and humility is a must. You can't really hold much of an ego, because if you do, you're just going to get humbled real hard, real quick.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, I don't really encounter that stigma as much anymore.
I find that a lot of people ask me over the years. I used to spend the winters on the North Shore, and people would say, where I live, man, the surfers really hate on bodyboarders. What's it like on the North Shore? And I found the same thing you just mentioned. Most of the people out on any board on the North Shore, they know what they're doing. Otherwise, they get their ass handed to them pretty quick. So there is a bit of that mutual respect. The surfers and bodyboarders seem to get along. And most of the bodyboarders out there do, in fact, they know not only what they're doing, but they know the hierarchy. Certain
Yeah.
guys, you got to let them get whatever wave they want. And then there's another tier of guys that are taking sort of their leftovers. And then maybe there's a third tier that are just getting into that spot and they're taking third leftovers, or so to speak. And as long as everyone seems to know their place and have respect for that hierarchy, it seems to go pretty well. I don't know. Do you find that to be the case as well?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just kind of just like it's very much unspoken.
Yeah.
But as soon as you kind of paddle out, you at most breaks on the North Shore, you kind of can see just based on the lineup, where everyone's sitting, who's sitting where, and usually the deeper and the more at the peak that they are, you can assume that these people have been charging this break for a while. They have earned their spot there, and they're pretty high up on the food chain.
And back in the old days, Ryder, before cell phones, if you stepped out of your little hierarchy, you
Yeah,
got smacked. You got
yeah.
punched, tackled, beaten up, sent home. Nowadays, you can't. You got the guys are very careful because somebody will bust out a cell phone and video them beating down on someone and end up in
Yeah.
jail. So it's sort of a different vibe out there. I think at least I'm talking specifically like Pipeline, which is to me like the most competitive lineup on the planet when it's on. But yeah, there that hierarchy, as you said, it's an unspoken thing. It still does exist out there, and it's a give respect, get respect world, I think, and particularly in the big wave world. So for you, I mean, what's the biggest? People are going to ask this. What's the biggest wave you've ever ridden?
Biggest wave I've ever ridden was probably about 40 feet. It was the day of the Eddy. It was right before back in, it was 2023. I
Yes.
uh I paddled out before the comp with a few friends. Um I've been in big waves before. I paddled out of Jaws, but that day the energy out there was just unreal. And I caught one wave that morning. It was a bit smaller. It was more around like maybe like 10, 13 feet Hawaiian. And and then I heard the lifeguards. They were just like, you can kind of hear them start yelling, like, everybody back away from the shore. There's a large set coming. And that was kind of my cue. I started just kind of paddling further out, and I didn't see the set yet. And then it started looming over the horizon, and I was like, okay, this is this is a big set. Um, and I knew the comp was about to start, and I was just like, you know what, it's here or
It's
never,
now or
and
never.
so
Yeah.
now or never, yeah. And so I looked this time. I looked down, made sure that nobody else was going for it.
Tyler
I started
LaRonde wasn't behind you.
make sure Tyler wasn't sneaking around. Didn't want to go for round two. Um, and John Florence was paddling for it, and he was too far behind it. He pulled off, and I was just like, "All right, this is it." And I just started kicking as hard as I could. And it's just when you're in waves that big, it's hard to get into them. I mean, I'm on a 43-inch piece of foam, and they're on 9-foot guns. And so I ended up kind of falling back a bit, and I was kind of more in the lip, and I ended up airdropping probably about maybe 10, 15 feet, and I just got absolutely worked. But not much of a ride, more of a fly, and that's the biggest wave I've attempted.
I've seen pictures of that day and you out there, and I remember the social media and bodyboarding was who was that guy? Who was that? And then word got out that it was you, and people were like, "That's so heavy, so gnarly, man." So I have to ask you, because you touched on 43-inch piece of foam. What do you ride in waves like that? Which board, which model, which brand, and
Yeah,
is it a
so
43?
I'm currently riding I'm riding for Custom X boards. I ride a 43-inch version of the JMV model. It's a
Yep.
it's I believe it's triple stringer. It's got what's the word? Four channels.
Yep.
Um, but it's nice. However, I this is where I really want to expand on, because I believe currently big wave boogie boarding is where big wave surfing was like 40, 50 years ago. It's still very, very new. And there's still that idea of that boogie boarding big waves like this. It's still quite impossible. And some of the rides that, like, I guess riding a boogie board, the equivalent of a way a surfer would on the wave that caliber, is still just like completely foreign, and just people just don't really, like I said, view it as possible. However, I believe that's completely wrong. And I think that there's still so much that can be done with improving and inventing and just coming up with new designs to handle that big of waves. Whether I think the biggest frontier for that is probably with towing. And I think experimenting with weight and just different channel designs and core designs as well. And I think with that, you can really just like start to experiment and see really where boogie boarding can go with waves of that size.
It's interesting you said that, because I remember after Mike rode Jaws in the mid 90s, he had pointed out that he had some special boards made for that. And one of them had plywood sandwiched into the core to add weight, because we've all seen, videos of guys like yourself charging giant waves. And I even go back to the 70s when Phyllis Dameron would charge Waimea on giant waves on these super flexible original Mori boards that had no stringers and PE cores, and the common denominator is bouncing and
Yeah.
skipping. So you're barely in control. You're catching air on every little bump, and sprays flying up. And it tends to, I mean, I've seen guys at Nazare try to bodyboard on giant days at Nazare, and one little bump, it's disaster. You can't hold on. So yeah, I feel like it hasn't even been had the surface scratched yet of board design for people like yourself that like giant waves. Do you have some designs in mind, and maybe you're trying to get Pete Anaya to make something for you?
Yeah. I think so. There's I believe it's the ICS, which is like the interchangeable stringers.
ISS,
Um,
yeah.
IS, yes, that's the one. And I believe there can be a lot of experimentation with that and adding weight to the stringers. And if you have a system like that where you just have the holes on the bottom and you can quickly, easily just switch them out, I think with that it would be a lot easier to experiment and just try new things with it because you can just easily test different weights for the board, flexibility with the stringers if you need it, stiffness, as well as just I guess tail designs as well. I don't have much of a knowledge with hydrodynamics. Um, Maybe with math, who knows? I could get more into it. But
Yeah.
with that kind of knowledge, I kind of look towards more like Pete to kind of help guide with that.
Yeah, it is really interesting that you brought up this topic of, bodyboard design for big wave bodyboarding. There's just not many people into it. So the few of you that like to charge crazy giant waves, um, you know, it's going to be a new frontier for you to design something that's going to work in those bigger gnarly conditions. I always thought like handles might be helpful on the,
Yeah,
on the top corners, just because of that bounce effect. Your hand comes off the nose and it's lights out. You'll just get
yeah.
steamrolled by the wave. So yeah, interesting to see what you're going to end up coming up with. Um, Surfing big waves, no joke. How tall are you? How much do you weigh?
So I'm 6'2" and I weigh around 183.
Yeah, so you're a tall guy, as you pointed out. How do you train and prepare to ride big, heavy waves? Well, maybe it's not just big waves. It might just be gnarly shore break. There's a viral clip of you. It says it's a keiki, and
Yeah,
I've seen it all over the internet. When you Google your name, Ryder Jalbert, you'll see that clip everywhere of you pulling into some gnarly closeouts at keiki. So, how do you physically prepare for that?
yeah. So a lot of the training I do is, I mean, as big as, being in condition physically, you need to be mentally trained as well. I mean, to be able to stay calm and under pressure like that, and when you're put in situations where even if you could drown, you got to just push that thought out of your head. So I do a lot of meditation. Um, I do a lot of breath hold training as well. I do CO2 and O2 apnea training. Um, and then I do a bunch of cardio. I mean, I'm really into Muay Thai, which is kind of like kickboxing and boxing together. And
Yep.
the cardio that I get from that, it pretty much it's honestly awesome cross training, and it just works so well with boogie boarding.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, the stuff you were talking about, the apnea stuff, I always see some of the big wave surfers talking about that type of training. And there's guys that actually have businesses where they train people to do that in pools. So you're basically training your body to get used to the feeling of not having oxygen and to be able to deal with the buildup of CO2 in your bloodstream that causes that panic. And to mentally, you mentioned how important that is to mentally fight that panic. So, yeah, that's amazing that you're doing that. So you're spending time on Oahu during the school year. Are you back in Maui now for the summer?
No, so I'm staying on Oahu currently for the summer. I'm taking some summer classes, and honestly, the waves are a lot better over here than they are on Maui during the summer.
Yep.
Um, and like I said before, I mean, I'm really into Muay Thai as well, and there's a great gym here where I currently train at, and so
So you're comfortable. Are you getting in the water much over there? And if so, what
yeah.
spots? What's your spot over there?
Um, so we've actually had a good run of swell recently. It's actually been really nice these last few weeks. Uh, I've been able to get in the water at least maybe like 4 or 5 times a week for the last few weeks, which has been great. Um, but I've been dabbling more in town. I was a bit intimidated first because a lot of the uncles in town and the crowd there can be quite aggro and gnarly,
Sure. Yep.
especially as a haole boy like me.
Yeah.
Um, but Standys, of course, that's just such a notorious spot, and it's one of my favorite places to go and boogie board and body surf. But I've been down like by Alamona Bowls. I've been going out at First Hole. Baby, I believe I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was Baby Hala Eva. That's one of
Oh
those
yeah.
spots there.
Yeah.
But those waves are really nice because you can kind of just pull in, start stalling, and you should get some nice long barrel rides.
Ever drop knee or strictly prone rider?
I never really got into drop knee. If I bought a board that could handle it a bit more, then I probably could see myself getting into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any bodyboarding influences that when you were coming up that you looked up to, pro bodyboarders maybe, or even local
Yeah.
guys? Yeah.
So growing up, I mean, like I said, it was always more of a hobby. I didn't really look at the professional aspect of it much. But then when I would say Andrew Carr has probably been the biggest influence for me because if I never stumbled upon him and seeing what he could do, then I probably would have never thought it would be possible. And so he was a great mentor for me. He helped me, with like figuring out like just how to train for this, what he does, what he rides, and just him helping me out, helping me paddle out at big wave spots. I mean, he took me out to Pier 1 on that day, that picture you showed, and he just was a great mentor. And I'm just always going to be thankful for him to helping me push my limits.
Is he still there in Hawaii?
So he spends his summers on the East Coast doing summer school, and then he comes doing surf school. And then during the winter, he comes to Maui and he lives and charges the winter swell.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
What does he do for work when he's on Maui?
I think he does some odd jobs here and there, but he just makes pretty good money with his surf school, and then he has some
Oh,
properties, I believe, as well that he rents out too.
got it. So he's figured it out. That's cool, man. Let me ask you this. Do you have any goals for your bodyboarding specifically, like maybe spots you want to ride or
Yeah.
anything like that? What's your goals?
So I'm my current goal right now is I'm gonna get out to Mavericks this winter. That's it's I've not seen many boogie boarders out there. But I would love to get out there and charge there. I mean, it's cold water, it's a bit gnarlier. There's just a lot more factors that come into play when charging
Yeah,
a spot like that compared to, I guess, Waimea or Jaws.
right.
Um, and then maybe if I can with if I have time ever in my life to get out to Nazare as well, I mean that would be amazing too.
Yeah, I was just about
Um,
to ask you about Nazare. So, yeah, have you ridden in wetsuits before? You grew up in Hawaii.
no, I've grown up in Hawaii,
Never?
so no, I haven't dealt with that stiffness and
Oh,
lack of flexibility that comes with
man.
wetsuits.
Woo! I can't wait to see if you can make it over to Mavs, how you handle. I mean, the waves, you've seen it. It's gnarly and packed with guys on 10-foot, 12-foot boards, but the water temp is going to be a whole nother element, like you said, man. So more power to you, man. I hope you
Yeah,
can pull that off. And Nazare too. It's cold, obviously.
yeah,
But that's so awesome, man. I look forward to seeing what you can pull off if you can make it over there, even if it's not this year or whenever you can get over there. Because, yeah, you're right. Mavericks is, I mean, there's been a few bodyboarders that have ridden Mavericks over the years. The early guys like Joe Kafka, Sarah Martin, um, are bodyboarders that surf Mavericks in the 90s. And then there was Alistair Taylor and Pat Caldwell went out there, but you rarely see anyone out there on bodyboard. So it'd be super cool to see you give it a crack, man. I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that left especially. I mean, I saw
Uh,
Kalani Latanzi body surf it this last winter, and I was just like, that looks very. I could very much pull into that with the right technique, and so I've been
yeah.
looking forward to chasing
He,
that.
he'd be your mentor. I think he's your
Yeah,
guy, man. The guy's a lunatic. Um,
he's crazy.
Yeah, man, but just so much respect for that guy. He's like part fish. Do you have any travels that you'd like to do for bodyboarding, like places you want to go that you haven't been?
Yeah, I would definitely love to spend some time in Indo. I went to and eventually maybe make it out to Chopu too. But I went to Bali a few years ago, and that's honestly like my only experience of bodyboarding in a foreign place, and that was really awesome. I did one of the boogie board camps there. I did it with Ryan Hardy, and he
Yeah.
was he was awesome. That was a really
Bally
cool experience.
bodyboarding. Yeah. Bally
Exactly.
bodyboarding. Yeah.
Shout out to bodyboarding. And so I spent 2 weeks there charging. Um, but and then also I've heard tales of just certain breaks in California along the coast that are just some labs that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And I'd love to maybe just one summer road trip when there's a lineup of swell and just
Yeah.
drive around and see what I can find.
Yeah. Northern Cal, even up in
Hmm.
Oregon, Washington. I know people in those areas that could send you in the right direction. And so if you ever need some intel from my end, I'm happy to help out. I won't be joining you out there, I'll tell you that. So you can have at it, buddy. So um okay, so it looks like we're running down on the time. Zoom does have a time limit when you don't want to pay for their premium service, and I'm too cheap to pay for it. So let me ask you, anyone you want to thank, anything else you want to say before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean, just first off, thank you, Andrew Carr, for pushing me to where I am today. There's this other spot in Maui called Deep to Peak, and they just train some of the best surfers in the world, and they helped me get into shape and just making sure that I was able to handle out there myself in these big waves, and then also just my family and my parents just for supporting me on this journey and just pushing me to my limits and just every step of the way.
And Custom X,
And
obviously.
yes, of course, and Custom X. Thank you so much to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, that's just, yeah, I
They're
wouldn't be
making
there
it
without those
happen.
guys. They're making it happen.
Love it, man. I love the enthusiasm. I love the spirit that you're bringing to the sport. And we're stoked we got a chance. I got stoked. I got a chance to talk to you. Like there's a team around me. I'm here by myself. But hey, listen, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, Ryder. And again, follow Ryder on Instagram. He gave his Instagram, but it's Ryder the Epic on Instagram. Check what he's doing, man, and we'll see where he goes with big wave bodyboarding. And keep charging, brother. I love it.
Right on. You mind if I get a quick picture of us real quick?
Please do. Yes, please. I'm gonna
All
throw
right.
shakas and look right in the lens of my computer.
Awesome.
I love this, man. So,
Right
folks,
on.
that'll do it for this episode of The Real Deal Show. Hopefully, you watched on YouTube or listened on the audio version and enjoyed this. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Put some comments down for Ryder and tell him what you want to see. And, folks, that'll do it. And thank you again, Ryder. Appreciate your time, brother.
And thank you, Jay. I'll
No
hopefully
worries.
talk to you again soon.
Sounds great, man. All right, everyone. See you in the surf.